He's waging class warfare on behalf of the working class with tariffs and controlling the border.
Oh my God. It's all very Orwellian, huh?
But he is also lowering the corporate tax rate and giving tax cuts to the wealthy in order to bolster that side of the economy. And so he's doing it.
He's cutting taxes for billionaires to help the working class, guys.
It's this two-pronged approach that I don't think we've ever seen before, and it's just a very interesting
Okay,
unique way to
no,
approach
we've seen it a million times.
Okay,
let me just hang on.
We've never seen, massive tax cuts for corporations and wealthy people. It's a novel concept here in the United States if you just forget about the last 50 years. This is with like the MAGA communist person. And Jenks on the panel. This is going to be a good one. Carrie Lake's in there. Let's go.
Up here with Trump saying it's going to be reciprocal tariffs across the board. And as a principle, actually, what is wrong with that?
Well, I think that Trump models his political style on the wrestling ring. Anyone who's been to a wrestling match in America knows there's a lot of manufactured aggro, dramatic moves, name calling. But often the audience knows that's partly manufactured because there'll then be some kind of, quasi victory or a climb down. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of theatrics, a lot of drama. There is still a chance that he will go forth now and strike deals with other countries to water down the tariffs. But thus far, it does look as if he's throwing down the gauntlet to the rest of the world. For him to describe this as reciprocal comes out of a theory amongst some of his advisors that after World War II, the US embarked on an uneven trade pattern to enable the rest of the world to develop quickly in the name of peace. And they think that's basically run past its sell-by date. Now, in some cases, they may be right. But imposing tariffs in this way is unlikely to rebalance trade in the way that Trump actually wants. It's unlikely to unleash this great big boom or economic boom that he talks about. It's much more likely to unleash stagflation. Because the reality is today, the world trading system is so interconnected that taking this kind of unilateral move is...
What exactly is stagflation? Is it just like neutral or negative growth paired with inflation? The economic condition characterized by simultaneous high inflation, stagnant economic growth, and elevated unemployment. Seems bad.
Highly likely to push up prices for American consumers as well as elsewhere in the world. And the sheer uncertainty and shock and the dismantling of these trade networks is almost certainly going to cause businesses to panic and for essentially economic activity to go down. So I suspect
it's like the worst thing that can happen from a macroeconomic perspective. Oh.
It's going to be quite painful for Americans like the rest of the world, at least in the short to medium term.
What if most people blink and come around to Trump's way of thinking very quickly? Could it then A, work, and B, be a vindication of what obviously is slightly bully boy tactics, but could those two things happen? I mean, could it be that it works and actually to America's benefit?
Well, it depends what you mean by working. I mean, yes, there are countries which will give some concessions. There certainly are businesses that will move a bit more manufacturing in.
Honestly, the Carrie Lake filter, I feel like, is turned down. Like, she normally looks like a animated Disney character.
Into America. And so, yes, it may work in the sense that Trump will be able to claim some short-term victories. However, the more likely reality is that almost every single company, every single country is now looking for alternatives and trying to look for ways to create alliances outside America. And global trade right now is rising quite rapidly, but mostly between countries that are not America rather than with America. So he's playing a very, very high stakes game. And of course, his bet is that the American public will endure the pain in the short term because he says in the medium to long term, it will reorientate the American economy. He's also betting, or at least Peter Navarro, his key advisor, is betting.
John Favreau from the Pod Save Bros described it as hubris. I can't really think of a better way to describe it. Of course, we've talked about it on the stream a bunch, but this expectation that American citizens are going to embrace or welcome this policy when it directly hurts them is so misguided. It's so is hubristic. Is that a word? I mean, it's really something. Again, I feel like it is a strong indication that Trump has constructed his day-to-day reality in a way that insulates him from the criticism that he receives very broadly across the country now. So if you were to ask Donald Trump, like, what do you think your approval number is right now? I think he would answer the question probably like 70, 80%. And I think he would believe it. I really do. I don't think, I think he dismisses out of hand any polls that he doesn't like. To the extent that he sees polls, it's going to be because he's watching MSNBC or CNN that morning. And he's just going to, he's thoroughly convinced himself that these news media organizations have, just like fabricated these numbers just out of thin air. It's really, it's really something. Like, the extent of his ego, I think, is on full display right now. He's doing this gambit, and listen, I'll give him credit. It's a bold move what he's doing right now. He's really swinging for the fences. But this is a gamble that I don't think is going to pay off for him. I think it's going to go really, really poorly for this administration. And if I had to guess, I think they're going to try to find some off ramp in like 3 to 6 months. And who knows how successful they'll be. I think he has the benefit of MAGA voters generally being pretty stupid. And if he tells them hey, actually the tariffs were a big win because we got 2% more out of our trade deal with China, and the worst of the economic downturn that we experienced was actually Joe Biden's fault, they'll probably believe him. But that's not going to fly with voters in the middle, independent voters. It's certainly not going to fly with Democratic voters.
That tariffs will raise about $6 trillion worth of revenues over the next 10 years, and that will essentially help pay down the debt. But both of those are pretty unproven bets. And in the short to medium term, it's more likely that the rest of the world starts looking for alternatives rather than simply becomes a vassal state.
Yeah.
I mean, the one to watch, in my view, is Canada above all else, because Mark Carney is a pretty strong character. He's respected by Trump, and he knows he's sitting on the ability to both cut off electricity supplies to a large part of the American voters, but also to blow up Trump's cheap energy policy as well. And I think it's unlikely that he's just going to roll over because he's facing an election.
Yeah, I think anything could happen. All right, Cenk, I get the overarching ambition of Trump here, where he wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and he's using a very blunt instrument to do it. And he did deploy tariffs reasonably successfully in his first term. I mean, do you agree with the principle that America is too riddled with debt? That's got to come down, and it's lost too much manufacturing. That's got to come back. So you may not agree necessarily with what he's doing with the tariffs. I'm sure you don't, but the principle behind it is not necessarily a bad one.
Yeah, as usual, if he did it with a scalpel, it might work, but he's doing it with a hatchet or perhaps with Elon's chainsaw. And that's the problem here. So can reciprocal tariffs work? Yes, but you've got to be careful in which industries you're affecting. You've got to think it through, strategize. It doesn't look like they did that. So they're just doing it across the board without being surgical, tactical, or strategic. So there's a couple of reasons why they're doing it, but the one is by far the most important. Trump's always liked tariffs. He's always believed that tariffs are going to magically repair everything in the country. No, they're not magic. They have upsides and downsides. In some cases, they make sense to protect manufacturing. In other cases, they don't, because they lead to inflation and stagflation. So number two is he uses it as a negotiating tactic. He's used that a lot, but now people are starting to call his bluff. And I'm actually a little bit worried that this is actually going to be a stimulus for the rest of the world to unite against us, because they have no choice. The European Union, Canada, Mexico, Japan, etc. South Korea will have to say, how are we going to respond to America? How are we going to respond against America? And I don't like them being united against us. I think that's counterproductive. But most importantly, Piers, none of this is going to last. He said, oh, this is going to last for years and years. There's no way that's going to happen. So it's way too much of a hatchet. And it'll hurt the stock market in the short run, the mid run, the long run, etc. his donors will rebel. They're already rebelling, et cetera. But all of this is actually just a ruse to pass that $4.5 trillion tax cut, because they want to be able to say what you guys just talked about. Oh no, the tariffs will magically bring us $6 trillion over a decade. So don't worry about that $4.5 trillion we're going to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Is he's, I think he heard the criticisms from his first term, in that, he passed these massive tax cuts and just didn't pay for them, just exploded our debt and deficit. And, I think like his MAGA, voices in the media or whatever are just they're gonna run with this, like that it justifies the tax cuts because we're gonna pay for them with the tariffs, right?
Going to funnel to all of our donors, to Elon Musk, to Donald Trump, and to all the richest people in the country, and to corporations. That's what all of this tariff nonsense is about. That's what the gold card nonsense is about. That's what Doge nonsense is all about. It's all to say, oh, don't worry about how we're going to blow up the debt and the deficit by doing another gigantic tax cut for the rich and for corporations.
David says, Hutch, the lady in the middle has weaponized ignorance on multiple occasions, even when debating destiny. I'm not super familiar with her, but I have seen her in a previous Piers Morgan appearance. And is she like a MAGA communist? Is she a literal communist?
Piers Morgan Uncensored is now proudly independent.
I mean, first of all, it appears when you called it a trade war, that President Trump is starting a trade war. No, he's actually trying to bring about fair trade. We've heard that phrase, fair trade.
Hasn't Trump himself called this a trade war?
Bantied about quite a bit over the past decades, but it's not been fair at all to America. Look at our manufacturing. It's just been hollowed out, and we've got to rebuild American manufacturing, not only for our economy and for the hardworking men and women and for Americans.
There was a fucking epic, what do you call it, fan cam that Kyle Kalinske reposted last night. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
You're gonna win so much, you may even get tired of winning and just say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're gonna win more. We're gonna win so much. Please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. We have to win more.
Really good. If you're ever in a shortage, of JD Vance memes, then Kyle Kalinske is a really strong asset to have.
And we need to
on
make
Twitter, at least
here in America, but really for national security as well. I mean, we're making everything in Asia, overseas, in India. We've got to make really important items here, whether it be medicines, whether it be vehicles. We need to do this for our national security. So much is made in China over the years, an adversary of ours. If they just turn things off to America, for lack of a better term, we're screwed. And President Trump is not just looking out for his donors. First of all, Cenk, he's not running. He's not running for office again, although he could probably very easily.
She does kind of look like she's about to hit me. You know what I mean? It looks like now it looks like a mugshot. Jesus Christ. She's doing like a Kubrick stare, It looks like Vincent D'Onofrio in Full Metal Jacket a little bit,
That's not what he
says he is.
Look at that. Look at that intense focus on her face.
He's looking out for the American worker, the American man, the American woman who's been out of a job, having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to try to keep up with what used to be a good manufacturing job. And we're going to be seeing
just deeply unsettling, the look on her face.
Manufacturing come back. And let me tell you, as we get rid of some of the jobs here, I call them welfare jobs in the federal government, people making a fortune, hardly doing anything in a federal government job. As we start to move people out of those jobs, we're going to
Hutch, please, I'm in my refractory period. Oh no.
Have a ton of incredible.
Did you jack off with the stream open? How many of you guys have done that? Be honest. Be honest. Left the stream open on a different tab. Not because it turns you on, but just because you were too lazy to close the tab. That I can understand. How many of you guys, you know, you're beating your shit, you finish up, you know, dick still in hand, and then you just like go over to kind of Twitter and you're just sitting there with your foot. You're not like jacking off to Twitter, but you know, just coincidentally now you have your dick in your hand and now you're just like scrolling through Twitter and like looking at the news with your fucking leaky in your hand. I've never done that, obviously.
Incredible jobs opening up as all of this investment from foreign companies comes in. We're going to be so proud to see Made in America on products once again. I applaud President Trump for taking a bold move. This is
I'm going to come.
You guys are getting better at the like appropriate Tangia messages for the moment.
This isn't the art of the deal. This is the art of the trade deal. And we've been getting abused by the international community for so long. And, you know, you see it in these trade deals where they make it so it's very negative toward America, but they try to tell us that it looks good, the trade deal's good for us when it hasn't been. This is actually a trade deal that will be good for America. Just you watch. It's going to come back. It's going to come roaring back. And we truly will see the benefits of this, I think, sooner rather than later.
But Carrie, before I go to Batia, has he got time? I mean, already you've got massive instability and turbulence in the market. Stock market is heavily down. You've got people suffering directly from the consequences of that. A lot of retired people will be very anxious about what's happening.
It's going to be.
Well, you say that, but well, it may be. But
this is the first time we've ever done this. This is the first.
Well, how the you know it's going to be short-lived then, right?
Yeah.
If it's novel like this, I mean, am I just supposed to trust that your economic principles here are sound, or?
So why do you think it's going to be short-lived?
It's the first time this has been done. It's good because it's the first time it's going to be done. There's jitters on Wall Street because we've never seen a bold move like this where the American economy, the American worker, American national security has been put first. And the president pointed many times to the Oval Office saying, it was my predecessors sitting in that office that left us in the position we're in. We don't have a choice. Just remember the debt that this country.
Apparently, okay, so this same influencer on the middle, Donald Trump, Donald Trump's team tweeted appearance on Fox News.
Let's be clear about what we're seeing right now. This market sell-off is Wall Street trying to short President Trump's agenda. They are betting against the American worker. It's utterly
That is not what a short position means.
despicable. Instead of doing what President Trump is doing, which is saying we're going to invest heavily in our middle class. We are no longer going to be a country in which our economy is an upward funnel of wealth from the hardest working Americans into the pockets of the international global elite.
Wall Street markets are just about confidence. They're just about confidence in the economy. What the market's telling us is that they are not confident in Trump's vision of the economy. That's what that means.
Wall Street is trying to control the president's agenda with this totally anti-American sell-off. And I think it's unbelievable that the president is not caving and that he is standing strong with the agenda that he promised the American people. This is what he was given a mandate to do. And it is so exciting to see somebody actually make good on the promises they made to the American people.
Who is this person? Batia Ungar Sargon? Is that who that is? He is an American journalist and author. Ungar Sargon is the deputy opinion editor of Newsweek and the former opinion editor of The Forward. He is the author of 2 books, the most recent of which is Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women, which discusses the challenges faced by American working class and the gap between them and the elite class. How did she end up like MAGA? How did this happen? I already know the answer to that question. Very opportunistic people. Ungar Sargon has stated that in the 2010, she self-identified as an American liberal. However, in the 2020, she felt herself drifting away from that ideology. In 2021, Barry Weiss of the Free Press said that Ungar Sargon was very hard to pin down ideologically because she identified her as a left-wing populist. Ungar Sargon herself self-described as a left-wing populist in 2023, although acknowledged that many people would view her as repeating conservative talking points. She attributed this perception to her focus on social class, which she feels has become abandoned by the left and taken up by the right. In a June 2022 discussion with Dennis Prager, Ungar Sargon stated she would describe herself as a Marxist. Asked by Newsweek in April 2024 which policies she would support, Ungar Sargon responded, greatly expanding vocational training, greatly limiting immigration, a government-backed catastrophic healthcare plan, outlawing degree requirements for jobs that don't require them, and outlawing software that weeds out those without a college degree during the application process, making zoning laws illegal, and expanding light touch density housing, which greatly expands the housing stock by allowing for duplexes and triple deckers to be built in areas currently zoned exclusively for single family detached homes. So she's not all bad. That's kind of based, right? Expanding tariffs on foreign imports, reducing welfare fraud, but expanding the child tax credit. In 2022, Batya Ungar Sargon began writing articles detailing her opposition to American support for Ukraine following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In those articles, Sargon wrote that she opposes U.S. support for Ukraine, arguing that resources should prioritize economically disadvantaged Americans over foreign conflicts. She also questioned the significance of Ukraine's territorial integrity and legitimized Russia's claims regarding Donetsk and Luhansk. Additionally, she critiqued U.S. intervention as exacerbating conflicts and warned that her support for Ukraine could prolong suffering. In response, James Kirchick of The Atlantic labeled Sargon a member of the intellectually bankrupt anti-war camp, accusing Ungar Sargon of being a part of a broader trend among certain political commentators who excuse imperialism while criticizing U.S. foreign policy, labeled her approach as short-sighted and reductive. In 2024, she wrote, "The average Republican voter is working class and truly loathes the Bush-era version of the Republican Party, which meant tax cuts for the rich, failed wars, and an economic agenda that outsourced jobs to China. Whether they realize it or not, this is why Democrats truly hate Trump." Now, there was some like repolarization along income lines, but I'm not sure that Trump won amongst people that make like under 100K. Control F. Under 50K voted for Trump 50% to 48%. Less than 100,000 voted for Trump 51% to 47%. Well, how's that working out so far? All right.
Country is facing right now $37 trillion in debt. We saw the inflation spike up under Joe Biden. President Trump is bringing inflation down. Of course, there's going to be jitters when people try to figure out how this is going to affect them. I believe it will be short term, and we'll see things level out.
That's comforting.
Not only level out, but it'll take the burden off of
I don't know about you guys. I feel comforted. I feel better about it now.
The worker will be able to keep more money in our pockets when the Trump tax cuts come and help relieve some of that pressure on the American worker. Our backs are breaking. And over the last 60 days or so, the American people have watched in horror as we've uncovered the way they're wasting money right here in Washington, D.C., where I'm sitting. I'm overseeing an agency right now where the most egregious, unbelievable waste of American taxpayer dollars is happening. And the American people have had it. Thank God for President Trump coming in and saying, we're going to just ask for fairness in trade. I mean, you guys are acting like he's denying the ability for another country to come in and sell their products here. He's just saying, let's make it fair. You charge us 50%, we'll charge you 50%. You charge us 0, we'll charge you 0. And better yet, bring your manufacturing, bring your company into America. You'll pay 0 in taxes. You'll save on the freight charges, and you will have access to the greatest consumer the world has ever known, the American consumer. Nobody wants to give up on the American consumer.
Okay, Batia, look, I can see arguments on all sides of this, but the concern I would have if I was Donald Trump is that the turbulence at the moment is pretty extreme. And you've already got a pretty hesitant economy.
What are we down to so far? Did the markets rebound at all? NASDAQ is down 1,000 points, down 5.3%. It did not rebound. That bad? Continued to go down. That's a pretty big drop, right? Didn't we say between 5 and 7%? I feel smart now. Yesterday I was like 8%. No. It's probably going to be like 5 to 7%. It looks like it's exactly in that range.
Fueled by a long-standing cost of living crisis. People are already feeling the pinch, millions of people, tens of millions. And this is coming at the worst possible time for them, this kind of turbulence. This has to work, and it has to work quickly, or it could turn out to be a very dangerous and reckless roll of the dice.
What I find so frustrating about the conversation around tariffs is that we all agree on the problem. We all agree that the deindustrialization of America led to the downward mobility of the American working class, deaths of despair, people working multiple jobs and not being able to afford the American dream. We all agree that it is deeply unfair for the American middle class to be bearing the burden of unfair tariffs from other countries. We all agree that it is great for the president.
Do we all agree?
To have leverage in order to demand reasonable things like that countries stop allowing fentanyl.
This fucking performative anger that's going on and like with Tim Pool and now her, like this, like, you know, like they just put so much pepper on the shit that they say, man.
Murder 100,000 Americans every year, and that Mexico do its part to police its own border.
Fentanyl's being smuggled in. It's being smuggled in across the border, right?
And yet when somebody has the courage to show up and say to Wall Street, screw you, I am waging war, I am waging class warfare on behalf.
The problem is if you go to Wall Street and say, screw you, like how many Americans have 401k? 72.2 million. That's a lot.
Half of the American working class, and you elites in Wall Street, you do what you need to do because I'm not going to stop fighting for the American working class. Suddenly, everybody is sitting around going, oh no, the stock market. Yeah, the stock market looks like that because the rich are punishing Trump for siding with the neglected and humiliated American working class over them. We have already seen these tariffs work, Pierce. The number of people crossing the southern border is at 0. Fentanyl is at record lows for the last 10 years. We have already seen 1.2
Stop screaming. Jesus, mother Christ.
$1 trillion in manufacturing invested in this country since January 21st. So they have already worked. Now, how long is Wall Street going to keep trying to punish this president for standing the American working class? I don't know, but I can tell you that the view from the street...
Even Cenk is like, Jesus Christ, what are we listening to here?
People cannot believe that there is a president who is working for them, who is putting them first and telling Wall Street to go screw itself. Wall Street, which picked the Democrats for the last 3 election cycles in a row. That's what the real story is here.
I don't know.
Economy has become over-financialized, that there's been pumped up asset prices. I would believe...
Yeah, is she auditioning to be like a press secretary? Kind of looks like it, right?
I agree very strongly that that has made the rich richer at the expense of ordinary American workers. I agree with all that. What I find very striking, and I think is going to be Trump's biggest challenge going forward, is that if you look at surveys...
You don't help like Main Street by making their lives more difficult with higher prices and like less jobs. I don't understand how, like, that's a tough pitch, you know? I wonder how this is going to age in even just a month from now, what this is going to seem like in retrospect. It's already silly right now, but yeah.
Of what ordinary Americans, not Wall Street, but ordinary Americans think is now going to happen to inflation and growth and employment. Inflation expectations have jumped up in the last 2-3 months from 3%.
Trump posted, I think it's going very well. The markets are going to boom.
Going very well. It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on. And it's a big thing. I said this would exactly be the way it is. We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many, many years. For many years, we've been at the wrong...
Yeah, bro. I mean, this is so much worse than the Bidenomics branding, in my opinion. It's
side
just...
of the ball, and I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The thing that people have to talk about, we're up almost to $7 trillion of investment coming into our country, and you'll see how it's going to turn out. our country's going to boom.
Well, we'll find out. Stay tuned.
percent to over 6%.
Watch this space.
That is actually higher under some measures than we saw during COVID. The employment expectations have cratered. Ordinary American workers right now are extremely anxious. So even if you accept the theory that this is going to reorientate American economy and trade in the medium to long term, I think it's very unclear that ordinary Americans are going to see the benefits of that anytime soon. You just have to look at the consumer polls on a whole range of different surveys right now and how dramatically they've collapsed. And so one of the questions I have is that, yes, maybe in the medium to long term, this might work out, as people like Peter Navarro would say. I actually have serious doubts about that. But in the short to medium term, it's going to be brutal. And when you say this is the first time we've had a president to do this, in fact, that's not correct. 100 years ago, we had a wave of extreme protectionism, not dissimilar to this, and that ended really badly. So the question I'd throw back to the panel and the cheerleaders for what's happening right now is, one, how do you think American consumers are going to react if their inflation expectations keep going up through the roof?
Yeah.
Particularly because gas prices are the most visible sign of inflation for them. And if Canada squeezes America now on the oil and gas exports, those will really...
Canada, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're specifically targeting red states with some of their more harsh tariffs.
Really go up pretty dramatically.
Kentucky bourbon and other manufacturing stuff that comes out of Michigan.
Dramatically, the gas prices. And secondly, why is it going to be different today from what it was like in the 1930s?
Can I respond to that?
Well, they're very good questions. Yeah, you can, yeah.
So first of all, American Compass did a survey of just GOP voters. We know now that the majority of Americans who make under $100,000 a year now vote for the Republican Party. So that was almost a means-tested poll. And they found...
Wow. I mean, we'll see how long that trend lasts. If you f them economically, I really doubt they're going to do the same thing in a few years. But
that 77% of GOP voters, the working class, not the elites, said that when they were asked, they said that...
To be clear, they also didn't win people under 100K a year by enormous margins. It was like three points, right? So like basically half the country did not that make under 100K did not vote for Republicans. She's talking about it in these terms that imply like an enormous mandate with working class voters.
They would be willing to pay higher prices if it meant bringing back manufacturing, because of course in their mind they are going to be the beneficiaries of those manufacturing jobs. About Canada, a lot of people are asking, why Canada? We love Canada.
I mean, I don't know what numbers she's looking at, but all the recent opinion polls that I've seen indicate that the tariffs are massively unpopular. Like they are not a popular policy. It's like 55 to 35 with like 10% of people that maybe don't have a strong opinion because maybe they don't know what tariffs are. But
Canada are our friends. Why wage this, tariff war on Canada? And of course, the answer is simple. Canada
simply going around and telling people that you're super popular and the things that you're doing are super popular is not a sustainable political strategy. I talk about this a lot, but it seems like the Trump people, a big part of their strategy is to just simply try to will things into existence. So they just repeat the same claims over and over again, hoping that people just sort of accept it to be true. And then maybe they want to be seen as like part of the in crowd. I don't know, I don't know if that's what it is, but they'll just repeat stuff over and over again. And regardless of the reality, I mean, like you can't just tell people like, we are popular with you. You like us over and over again. People are just going to, at the end of the day, they're going to go to the gas station. They're going to go to the grocery store and they're going to be like, I don't like you. I don't like this.
Canada and Mexico are the back door to the American economy because we have this trade deal with them, the USMCA.
Giggity, giggity.
So if there are no...
I can't say that. Giggity, giggity. I can't say that. I can't. How do you say that? Giggity, giggity. It's so hard to say. Does anybody else have trouble with it? Giggity, giggity. I make it to the fourth syllable and my mouth just gives up. Giggity, 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 giggity. Oh my God. All right. No, I
tariffs
can't do
on
it.
China.
I can't do it.
If
I can't do it.
Canada and Mexico do not match our tariffs on China,
I can't do it.
Bing bang. Ting tang. Walla walla bing bang.
How do you do that with your mouth?
China simply builds car manufacturing plants in Canada and in Mexico, which they have already done, and they use that in order to get tariff-free cars into the American market, which is exactly what President Trump is trying to get away from. So what he wants from them is for them to close that back door. And I just want to emphasize again, you know,
Phrasing.
back in the 70s, when the majority of the GDP in America was in the middle class, right? That's kind of like the golden era that we look back to of when the economy was really healthy and working class people felt that they could afford a middle class life. 25% of.
And what happened after that? 40 years of massive tax cuts for the rich, with this promise that it was going to trickle down to American workers, and it didn't. It didn't trickle down. The problem is not global trade. The problem is the wealthy people in this country now pay way less taxes than they did 50 years ago.
Our economy was in manufacturing. Today, the top 10%.
Deregulation, union busting, and massive tax cuts for rich people. And then it becomes this like vicious cycle. Because it's really hard to run on, even if it's the right thing to do, it's really hard to run on tax hikes. You know, it's hard. Like once you do tax breaks, it's hard to undo that. It's like Medicare, right? Or like Medicaid, or like the potentiality for something like Medicare for all. If we actually accomplished single payer healthcare in this country, it would be really hard to undo that because people would get used to it. And if you're somebody who's running for president now, you basically have to run on cutting taxes, and it's just, you know. And it didn't have to be this way.
And control over 60% of the GDP. And that is a direct result of the fact that only 10% of our economy is manufacturing. And the largest share, 20%, is in finance and real estate, which is, of course, how other countries artificially we have artificially inflated the dollar, which makes the product of the American worker unaffordable. And so what the tariffs are doing are simply saying we are refusing the rate.
It's going to raise like you're complaining about like, oh, the prices are too high. It's like, well, the fuck do you think is going to happen when American companies have to pay a 33% tariff on products coming in from Taiwan or whatever?
To the bottom in wages. It is unfair to the American worker, which I think we have all basically agreed on at this point.
I think, can I say two things back to
Gillian,
that?
I know you have to.
I agree.
You can, because I know you have to leave us, Gillian. So if you
rich.
respond, and then,
Yeah, briefly, tax cuts going to help the rich. I'd love to know how you think that's going to help the ordinary workers. And secondly, if you look at the Canadian trade, the auto sector is so integrated that in fact it's not the case of Canada exporting lots of cars to America. It's part of a North American continuous supply chain. Again, Mexico and the US are the same thing. Cars cross the border 7 times in the course of making a car. And it's energy, above all else, that Canada really relies on in terms of the US trade. And that is not something which has anything to do with China at all.
Yeah, I know. What I was just trying to point out is that Trump's end game with Canada is not the tariffs. It's for them to close the door to China. And about the tax cuts, I think Trump is doing something really unique here, which is also answers your question about FDR and how we avoid that. He's waging class warfare on behalf of the working class with tariffs and controlling the border, limiting the supply of.
Oh my God. Oh, it's all very Orwellian, huh?
Immigration and of labor, but he is also lowering the corporate tax rate and giving tax cuts to the wealthy in order to bolster that side of the economy. And so he's doing it.
Oh my goodness. Does she believe this shit, or is she just a propagandist? Like, he's cutting taxes for billionaires to help the working class, guys.
Game here where he's using 2 mechanisms in order to raise the wages of the working class and using 2 other things in order to attract investment and to give those people who are business leaders an opportunity to feel better about what he has planned for them. Deregulation, this stuff is a really big deal if you are on the business owning side of things.
How is she a Marxist? She like claims to be a Marxist, and she's all about like this
this is great for business leaders and it's great for industry. And so it's this two-pronged approach that I don't think we've ever seen before. And it's just a very interesting and unique way to approach
we've seen it a million times.
Okay, let me just hang on.
We've never seen, massive tax cuts for corporations and wealthy people. It's a novel concept here in the United States if you just forget about the last 50 years. But
Steve Bannon himself.
Hang on a second. Let me give hang on. Final word to Gillian because I know you have to go.
Cenk's about to spit here. Watch.
So Gillian, respond to that. Then I'm going to get a Cenk and then to Carrie. Yeah.
Steve Bannon himself.
Yeah, I guess technically the Nazis were National Socialists, right? So if she's a Marxist, maybe that works.
Is so worried about the income inequality is going to be fueled by giving tax cuts to the wealthy, and so worried about the debt implications that he said on the record that he thinks there should be tax rises for the wealthy. I think that's where many American heads are right now. And I'd be really curious as to how Trump weathers this going forward. And I'm sorry, I do have to jump. I do apologize. It's great.
He's not going to weather it. I think his approval ratings guys are going to tumble. I don't know if they're going to go like down to the 20s or whatever, but I think they're going to tumble down lower than they were his first term. I mean, if there's one thing you don't do if you're a politician is intentionally the economy. Like they're just not going to put up with that.
Conversation that I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Gillian, great to have you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Great talking to you, Gillian.
The Trump tax cuts
Now, I got to get in here. This is a lot of nonsense.
We'll say goodbye to Gillian. We're going to carry.
Cenk has been waiting patiently in the wings here. Has he even said a single word this entire time?
Do you like paying more taxes?
Okay.
Cenk, do you want the Trump tax cuts to go
listen,
away?
Can I just regulate here and actually give truth and reality to this nonsense propaganda?
Why is it fair that Vietnam is charging us 90% in tariffs and we're not charging them the same? President Trump's actually being very fair.
Carrie, you want a
Hold on. That's grok. Does Vietnam do 90% tariffs against U.S. imports? No, Vietnam does not impose a 90% tariff on U.S. imports. The claim that Vietnam applies 90% tariff on U.S. goods appears to stem from a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of trade data, possibly related to the U.S. trade deficit with Vietnam, rather than actual tariff rates. According to available data, Vietnam's average most favored nation applied tariff rate was 9.4% in 2023, as reported by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in the 2025 National Trade Estimate. Most U.S. exports to Vietnam face tariffs of 15% or less, with higher rates applied to specific categories like consumer-oriented food and agricultural products. However, there is no evidence of a blanket 90% tariff on U.S. imports.
Giant corporate tax cut, don't you? You both want a giant corporate tax cut. That's what this is about. It's all a giant ruse. You're not going to hear anything about tariffs after they pass that tax cut. This is not populism. It's the exact opposite. Okay, you want it, right? You want the $4.5 trillion tax cut for all your corporate buddies, right?
I do.
And you're trying to disguise that as populism?
No, I want it for all Americans.
Of course you do. Not for you, for the giant corporations and the wealthy. That's what the tax cut's for. So let me just back up and explain all of this, okay? So number one, Kerry originally started talking about national security. That's always the excuse that they use. Biden used the same excuse. He said, the CHIPS Act, it's national security. We have to make the chips here at home for semiconductors. Yeah, there's some truth to that. And there's some truth to protecting manufacturing here and for national security. But what do they use it for? Biden used it to shovel over $50 billion in subsidies to the donor class. Now, Trump is going to use it for $4.5 trillion in giant corporate tax cuts where they're going to take it from 21% to 15%. Steve Bannon is right about that.
The CHIPS and Science Act actually created tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs.
Both on the right and the left are right about that. Even if it was true that these magical things like these tariffs are going to last for years and years, no, they're not. After the tax cuts, you're never going to hear the tariffs again, okay? But even if that were true and they were to raise $6 trillion, well, okay, great, because we have a $37 trillion debt right now, and the populace are the only ones who actually care about it. The establishment Democrats and Republicans, and now Trump, and also in his first term, now in his second term, are going to add and add and add and add. So if you're worried about the debt, why would you do $4.5 trillion to the richest people in the country? Why are you taking it out of our pockets, putting it in their pockets? Trump already took the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Now he wants to bring it down to 15%. These tariffs are nothing but a distraction and a squirrel, so he can say, oh, it's all good. It's all good. I'm not going to add to the...
Forcing U.S. consumers to pay more when they buy goods and services, while at the same time cutting taxes for the wealthy. It's like literally the opposite of what left-wing populism is supposed to stand for. It's just like a wealth transfer.
The debt, you give all my corporate donors trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. If you were actually serious about being populist, you would say, okay, look, no matter what you think about tariffs and whether you think a more strategic approach would have been better or a blunt instrument like this, we can all agree that there's no reason to give away $4.5 trillion to corporations. You cannot make the argument that that's a populist position. That is a giant, giant, giant giveaway, and I can't stand it. And Batya, the way that Wall Street works, and I believe me, I have no friend at Wall Street. Hold on.
Well.
The way that Wall Street works is, why does the stock market go down? It's not because it's a cabal and they get together and they're like, should we punish Trump? No, the price of aluminum goes up when you do the tariff. So what does that affect? For one of the things that it affects is beer, because the cans are made out of aluminum. So then I read a story today about how both on the Canadian side and the American side, they're worried about how the price of beer is going
Jenks kind of spitting here, huh, boys?
to go up. And also true of energy, so the price of gas is going to go up. So when that happens, the shares of those companies, beer companies, Coke...
It's not that these Wall Street investors are trying to sabotage Trump. They're just looking at the market conditions and saying, we don't feel optimistic about the next, foreseeable future. That's
oil companies, et cetera, they go down a little bit because they know they're going to sell less because their prices are going to be higher and the economy is going to be hurt by it. They have that normal reaction to it. I'm not the guy who thinks, oh, stock market's the bellwether and the only thing that matters. No, wages matter. But this doesn't actually get us higher wages. It doesn't get us paid family leave. It doesn't get us anything that helps the average American. Instead, he's going to hurt the economy real bad because he's doing it in such a blunt way. And then he's going to use it as an excuse for his giant tax cuts that are going to go to all the corporations and all the donor class. And then afterwards, you're never going to hear the tariffs again. You're not going to hear the gold card. You're not going to hear a Doge. You're not going to hear anything, because the whole point is that giant giveaway to corporations, not to the average American.
Well, I'm glad you got your talking points. Jeez. Oh, you know what, Cenk? You can just write a check back to the U.S. Treasury.
Stone cold reality. You want to help your corporate buddies, don't you? Why do we have a corporate tax cut? Carrie, why do you want a corporate tax cut? If you're
that was a Washington Post article.
For all Americans. I want the Trump tax cuts to continue for all Americans.
Corporations are not Americans.
I'm in Washington. It's so typical that the left always interrupts, but I'm here in Washington, D.C., Cenk, okay? I'm watching how they're abusing the American taxpayer. President Trump is standing up for the American taxpayer. We're cutting the waste in Washington, D.C. At the same time, remember, the Democrats have... Sadly, they used to stand up for the working class. They don't care about the working class anymore. Look at all the wealthy donors who donated to Kamala. They're not for Trump anymore. They aren't. And he cares about the working men and women. I have lived, and I've been all across this country. I've lived in parts of the Rust Belt before where towns are just boarded up factories that haven't seen any work done in them for decades. We are going to bring back manufacturing and jobs for the American man and the American woman. And we're going to do so very quickly. This is not something that we're going to slow roll.
Press X to doubt. Let's go. Hutch, crisis and mod chat. Please read when you get home.
Into. We've been watching for years as America's gotten screwed over by trade deals, and President Trump isn't going to stand for it anymore. We know this will work. There's going to be a lot of fear-mongering coming from the left and the media. There's going to be a ton of fear-mongering. Your beer prices are going to go up. All the stuff Cenk just said. Just wait and see. This is going to happen. There's going to be a few bumps along the way. But in the end, we are going to see a strong American economy, a strong middle class. You're right. The middle class has been decimated.
He said what now? Oh, dear.
It's going to come roaring back. If we don't have a middle class, our economy will never be strong again.
So, Piers, take note of this show. I want to bring it back in 3 months and 3 years. You'll see magically have a booming economy.
No, what I've been struck by.
None of these tariffs will be around in 2 years.
Well, what I've been struck by is the absolute certainty that all four of you have all four of you are completely certain, but only two of you can be right. Right? So in 3 or 4 months, this is all going to play out, and two of you will look ridiculous. I just don't know which two.
I will tell you.
Cenk is going to look like a genius. Okay.
I mean, Batty, are you prepared?
I will tell you why. I'll tell you why the ladies on the set are right.
I feel less worried about that.
Because Trump has a track record. Yeah, Trump has a winning track record. Cenk, you've been wrong a lot. I'm just going to say that. I love you, but you've been wrong a lot. President Trump has been right almost about everything. We've seen him build our economy up before, and he had one hand tied behind his back because he had the swamp working against him. And now he's got the people with him. He's got Washington, D.C., the draining of the swamp.
He is the swamp. I mean, look behind his back. During the inauguration. Who was sitting right behind him during the inauguration?
Swamp, the ending of the waste of our tax dollars, and now he's ready to go.
John Swamp is at it again. True.
Go in and rebuild the middle class. And all we're asking for is parity, fairness here. We're not asking for everybody to, we're charging tariffs on every other country. If they're going to charge us zero, we'll charge them zero. But let's have fairness.
It's not even parity. I
And
mean,
you know,
the tariffs that he just...
Batty, let me just ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. The one thing I would say is, I've known Trump a long time. For him to stake everything as he is on this, when he was coming in on such a wave, having won everything in the election, amazing, the greatest comeback in modern political history anywhere in the world, he didn't need to do this. The fact he's gone all in on something that could literally determine whether this presidency works or not, and whether he goes down as a transformative, great president or a disaster. The fact he's gone all in, to me, in the way that he's doing, makes me think that at the very least, he believes, and his financial advisors that he has around him, that they all believe this can work. Otherwise, why would they do it?
I think that's exactly right. And the question is, work for who? This is a redistribution of wealth from the elites who are invested in finance and in real estate to Americans who work with their hands for a living. You know, the first term,
we are going to pay these costs. Like, we are going to cover the costs of this. This is a tax raise. This is just a tax hike. It's a flat tax hike on everybody. It's exactly what conservatives have been clamoring for 50 years.
You know, the left used to say, what did Trump accomplish except for, a giveaway to the rich? Well, he closed the border, which was
These tariffs represent the most significant tax hike in modern American history.
Huge and transformative revolutionary act, which was...
Do you think NVIDIA is not going to up the price of the, 5070 Ti after this?
Totally successful. And he imposed a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum. And guess what? For 4 months, the price of steel and aluminum went up a little bit. And after 4 months, it went right back to where it had been when he imposed the tariff.
If he's talking about the first time around, is she talking about the first term? We lost over 100,000 jobs because of his tariffs.
Because we have a very healthy capitalistic system with...
Find me a single economist. Okay, hold on. Let's ask Grok again. I love using Grok because it's Elon's thing, right? So 2018 study by the Trade Partnership, a pro-trade think tank, estimated that while the tariffs might create around 26,000 jobs in steel and aluminum production, they could cost around about 432,000 jobs in downstream industries due to higher input costs, translating to a net loss of roughly 16 jobs for every job gained. Nice.
Within the borders of this country, and that free market did its thing, and it brought the price back down. So we know we can expect what we know what it looked like then. And by the way, that happened in 2017. In 2018, you know what inflation was? It was 1.8%. So I just think we've all been there. I mean, we were all there. We all witnessed that, but we're all acting like we have this amnesia. And, to your point, Pierce, what is the theory of mind on the left as to why Trump is doing this, potentially losing it all over tariffs? They don't.
Because he's stupid. Because he believes bad things. And because he's corrupt. And he's going to use these tariffs to pick favorites and punish people he doesn't like. But it's because he's stupid. It's because he's incompetent.